the interesting thing that I saw, and it kind of connected all three of those verticals, kind of leads me to the discussion of human trafficking, where I heard someone, an expert in the field, talking about how victims tend to be disproportionately coming out of, quote unquote, the system, the foster system or what have you, and that kids that are in unstable households also tend to be targets for those that would traffic.
Yeah.
Um, so that got me thinking about, not only the homelessness, but the domestic violence, because that can lead to the instability,
Yes.
and then there's the human trafficking that might result from those. Um,
Yes. Yes. It's very unfortunate that we are seeing an uptick since the pandemic in familial trafficking. So more families are trafficking their children and youth because it's a way to earn income. So, families are really suffering out there and financially aren't able to make it. And so one of the unfortunate, things that have occurred is the uptick in human trafficking. And children are being trafficked now more than ever, which is it's devastating. But we're just so thankful that we're here and we're able to provide some of those services for the youth. We have a case manager that works directly with children and youth of trafficking. And some are in foster care, some have run away from foster care, some are in homes, some have left their homes and run away because of things happening, and some are in juvenile detention because there's just no place to put them. And so I'm thankful that we've had services to provide with our case manager and our medical and therapy and things like that. But that has really led us to identify one of our biggest gaps here at Samaritan House and in the community, in the region, and in the state, to be honest with you, is a place for trafficked youth to be able to live temporarily while these things are being sorted out. And so that's why we've taken it upon ourselves with the board of directors and myself to strategically plan to build a trafficked youth facility, which I'm thankful and grateful to say is going to be turning dirt here. But in about June or July, we're going to be starting the building process. So we're just thrilled to be able to build an 8-bed facility to help house some of those youth who could have been, runaways or ran away from home for whatever reason. But they just need a place to stay once they've been rescued. And our task force, and we just were not aware that we were going to find so many youth, so many minors. No one anticipated that when we started the task force. And when that started and the uptick, we started seeing youth, we said, oh my gosh, we've got to do something. So Samaritan House, again, retooled itself and said, we're going to fill that gap. We're going to build a youth facility. So that's what we're doing right now. That's our biggest project, our most recent project happening.
well, that will be a blessing to those people that are able to
Yes.
take advantage of that facility. And it struck me when you and I first spoke a few weeks ago that the terminology, trafficking, I think in many minds in America, they think of trafficking as something that happens, in third world countries. And I don't think there's maybe all that great of an awareness about the extent of it here in this country. And,
Absolutely.
what I was reading was that, 71% of it, but it's hard to pinpoint numbers in this area because, it's a moving target and so much is undiscovered. So a lot of these are just approximations, but from those that they've been able to identify, they said it's disproportionately female, and highly disproportionate
Domestic.
representation from the minority communities. It's what they often said were marginalized communities,
Yeah.
because we talked about kids that were in the system. It's not all just kids, but one of the points that I was reading about was that if kids are in the system, the reason they're so vulnerable is because oftentimes the caseworkers are overloaded, or the files are being shifted from caseworker to caseworker and creating the potential for the kids to slide through gaps. And then foster families, maybe that's not true here in Virginia Beach, but in some larger cities, there's too many kids being watched by too few, and there's just so
Yeah,
many opportunities for kids to fall through the cracks, and the traffickers know where to find these kids and how to attract them and how to lure them in.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, kids are vulnerable for a lot of reasons. You did a great job describing many of those reasons. And we're finding that, to be true. But it's just sad in this day and age that people are trafficking their children, or children are so vulnerable that they're being preyed upon by these traffickers. And it's gone on for a long time, but we're just now seeing it because there's money being funneled to nonprofits and to task forces and to police forces and things like that, so that we can look at it and we can find these victims. But it has probably been around longer than any of us are willing to admit, or even your brain protects you from things that you really don't want to believe because it's just so awful. And so it's devastating to hear the stories of what we hear. And it's to the point that we have to bring in a therapist for our own staff to help manage what they hear on a day-to-day basis.
I was going to ask you about that because all the years you've been there, I mean, and then all of your staff, and it has to take a toll.
It does.
You're just not a human being if tragedy doesn't affect you.
Yes, yes. But back to your question, the majority of the trafficking that we have seen is domestic trafficking. It's happening here at home. It is not with foreign nationals. We do have 5% foreign nationals, but typically it's domestic sex trafficking with girls. But that is because that's where our task force was looking, right? The hotel and motel industry, where they're getting tips and tip lines. But our task force is now going to be looking at labor trafficking a little bit more, and looking in the agricultural areas, and looking and following tips on construction sites where there's unpaid labor. So, it's often you will find what you're looking for. And so right now, the majority of the trafficking that we've seen since 2017 is domestic trafficking with girls, with young women here at home. And we kind of thought maybe the pandemic would prevent maybe some sex work from happening, and maybe the Johns would not want to buy sex because of the pandemic, and they'd be afraid of COVID, but that didn't seem to happen, unfortunately. A lot of women were moved from New York when New York shut down early on. A lot of girls and women were brought here by traffickers in our own hotels and motels. And so all kinds of things can happen because of a pandemic, but we really didn't expect there to be an uptick in human trafficking as well, and not an uptick in trafficking children. So it's been devastating, but at the same time, if you this is God's work, and I'm glad that Samaritan House is here and we're doing this work, because it's not for everybody, and everybody can't do it. And so our staff are specially trained, specially supported, and a lot goes into, when you get federal funding, a lot of things, a lot of I's you have to dot and a lot of T's you have to cross, and a lot of training you have to get. So I'm just happy that we're here and we're doing the work, and someone's got to do it. It's tough work, but someone's got to do it.
When you and I first talked, I want to try to be as vague as possible to protect, people's
Yes.
anonymity. But a friend of a friend had a daughter that kind of experienced what you were discussing, and I guess there was maybe some fighting between parent and child, which is not
Yeah.
atypical in any family, but teenagers are
Yep.
rebellious. But the disturbing thing that it was basic middle class family, and when they did locate her, it was through a friend who who called her mom, I think is what happened. And turned out, she was in a motel with two men. They had drugged
Yeah.
her up. They had convinced
Yes.
her that, she's more valuable, that they love her more than her parents do. And they
Yes.
manipulated her. And it connected me, with this article that I had read, that the traffickers often use the same kind of psychological manipulation on kids, not just minors, but young
Yeah.
people, that
Yeah.
that that physical abusive people often use. It's that,
Yes.
that putting the guilt on the victim rather than the other way around. And things
Yeah.
like, you're giving it away for free, so why don't you make some money,
Yeah.
appealing to whatever they
Yeah.
find is the driver, and how they
Yeah.
can suck them in.
Absolutely.
These are
Yeah. I mean, we're seeing the traffickers using puppies right now, they'll get a victim, a young woman, young girl, a puppy, and she'll fall in love with that puppy. And then it won't be long where they'll threaten to kill or take away that puppy if you don't meet the quota, the sex quota or the sex work quota that they have for that day or that week. And so appealing to anything, whether it be pets or money or special bags or special attention or even nice clothes and nice shoes. I mean, they'll appeal to anything for a vulnerable youth. But we're seeing that pets work really, really well with young girls. And so, we even had to design a pet shelter in one of our shelters so that, a victim who maybe the pimp or the trafficker is arrested, but they can't go anywhere with a pet. And so, we're saying you can come here and you can bring your pet too. So you don't have to make that decision of, am I going to lose my pet? Is it going to go to the SPCA? Are they going to adopt it or destroy it? Or, and they don't. They have great programs at the SPCAs, but, some of these victims just don't trust that that's going to happen, even though they sign paperwork. So you can bring your cat, you can bring your dog, your puppy, your fish, your mice, you can bring anything you want to one of our shelters that's accommodating to pets. And so we had to design that specifically because of all victims, but specifically because of the human trafficking. I was coming into work and one day there was a puppy in my office and the next day there was a dog in the office and a cat. And I'm like, this has got to stop, But who the heck wants to say no to a victim because they got a pet? So of course we're going to take them. But our offices were becoming little, animal shelters. So I said, we've got to do something about that and build a shelter. And thank God to the Hampton Roads Community Foundation, to the Red Rover Foundation that gave us these great grants to, convert one of our shelters to a pet shelter. And the pets have a side to be on, but you can also bring the pet to your bedroom and all the walls are waterproof and the floors are waterproof. And it's a beautiful facility. So, but these are the types of services you have to have when you have those vulnerabilities with people that, really need their pets for emotional support animals, whether it's therapeutic, or just a pet. You need to be prepared for that, because traffickers will use anything they can to get into the minds of these young women.